Hi, Clarissa Mosley, Calm Mind Psychology, psychologist and psychotherapist, and I'm continuing my talk on gaslighting because it's pretty big and very important, because the effects of being gaslit on an individual can be profound and lasting. When you are being gaslit, who you are and what you believe in and what you are saying and what you are feeling is completely nullified. In fact, it might even be twisted. You might be told, no, you don't feel that. How could you possibly feel that? You might be told, you don't know what you're talking about. You might be told, well, you might think that, but everybody else thinks this. In fact, they all think you're a little bit odd also. You might be compared to other people. Oh, well, when I was in my other relationship, this never happened. Nobody else has had a problem with this before. You're the first. You might be told you're making a big deal out of things. Oh, calm down. What are you making a big fuss about? It wasn't that bad. So this is completely denying your reality. It's like you have a genuine complaint, and rather than hearing it and going, well, I didn't mean it to come across like that, you're actually told that you're bad, wrong, and faulty for having the experience that you do. Now, this might become even more confusing when it's doubled up with the person who's doing the gaslighting sometimes being nice, sometimes telling you that they are the only person that cares about you. They're the only one who's got your back. Like, you need to trust them because they know the truth and the reality and they care about you. You might be told you're too sensitive, you might be told you're difficult to please, you might be told you're too much. Now, this is a big fear for many people, that they're stupid, that they're bad, that they're wrong, and that they're a burden. Basically, gaslighting is a form of abuse, an emotional abuse and control tactic. You're being made to feel crazy for having basic thoughts, feelings, needs, and wants. So I'm going to tackle a little bit after why gaslighting might happen. But let's understand how it can happen. People want to be loved and appreciated. They want to be liked. They want to be in partnerships and relationships. And as mentioned in my previous video, most of the time, the relationships with someone who's going to gaslight you start off nicely. There is no sign of gaslighting, otherwise you probably wouldn't go into the relationship. Now, this can be a matter of degree. The gaslighting might start early and subtly. The manipulator might be testing the boundaries. Are you someone who's weak enough to be pushed around? If so, they want to have a relationship with you. Most people that I've counselled, men and women, most people that I've talked to, men and women, that have been in a relationship with someone with narcissistic tendencies, because gaslighting does go hand in hand with narcissistic tendencies and characteristics. But most people have early warning signs. Now, it might not be immediately in the relationship, but it's often pretty early on. Sometimes it's days before the wedding, or some commitment is consolidated within the relationship. And this is where you must trust your gut. I cannot count the amount of people that in retrospect have looked back on the relationship and said, I had a bad feeling. And maybe they sort of went, I'm going to ignore all of the flags. And maybe they can trace back the behaviours to the first signs of the gaslighting, the first signs of the control, the manipulation and the abuse that became a pattern within their relationship. And they really wish that they could go back to their former selves and say something like, please, don't be so deluded. Don't be so hung up on the hope and the dream of this relationship that you are going to ignore your early warning signs, that you are going to stuff down those gut feelings and push on through. But sadly, many people do this. And they're left wondering at some point in the relationship, why? Why does this person need to be this way? Like, I will happily fall in line to get the good things out of this relationship, to get that good part back. If only they could be nice. If only they could be kind and consistent. Why do they have to be so mean? Why do they have to twist me like this? Why do they have to deny my reality? And so it's that why question I'm going to try and answer for you now. The why of the abusive parts of a relationship and a person are very hard to answer. People have shadows. People have parts of themselves that they're completely unconscious of. And some people are just plain mean. Many people have got psychological disturbances of some way, shape or form that they may or may not be aware of. And in the case of gaslighting, these psychological differences and disturbances can go right through to the core of the personality. So it's not like anxiety or depression where the symptoms cause a person to feel troubled and seek help, although this can co-occur. But when something is embedded in someone's personality and or it's something they are highly unconscious of or simply don't care enough about you or the behaviour to want to change, because many narcissists will just leave a relationship, discard you, and go and find someone else who's willing to play their game and give them the supply that they're after. So the first point about why someone does gaslighting, why someone behaves this way, is one, because they can. You are in some way, shape or form enabling it. You are being complicit to it. Now, I am not victim blaming, and I am certainly not saying that people ought to be abused and it's their fault. Absolutely not. But I do hang a lot on the adage that I don't like it actually, that you get what you put up with. And these behaviours indeed happen so subtly that the whole aim of gaslighting is to make you feel that you're crazy and wrong. And often the behaviours don't start until you're well committed. And sometimes it's when there's a family formed, there's marriage, there's children involved. So again, I'm not saying that you are at fault or responsible for another person's behaviour. Absolutely not. Narcissistic tendencies, gaslighting and so on will happen probably regardless of the victim and the person in the target. But there is some form of reciprocity. You know, if in those early stages of the relationship, when the flags came up and the gut feeling and they were waving in the wind, and the person in the relationship with the person who was doing the manipulative maneuvers said, no, I'm out of here, then they wouldn't be engaging in that. The perpetrator, the gaslighter, would have to go and find another target, another victim. Sadly, it doesn't mean to say they might not stop. They might stop temporarily, but their way of being in a relationship is to control, to overpower, to make the other person the wrong one. So they do it because they can, and they do it because there is another person on the other end of it who is in some way, shape or form receiving the behaviour. So the boundaries get violated until there are hardly any boundaries left. And setting a boundary with someone with narcissistic gaslighting tendencies can be very difficult, particularly if it's a parent, if it's a boss, or if it's someone that you're some way, shape or form dependent on. And of course, narcissists love to make their victims dependent on them. That's part of the game. They want to control you and they want to supply for their sense of control. Now, we always think narcissistic supply is like getting all the good stuff, getting all the adoration. Narcissists are usually still getting that, but they're getting it from somewhere else. I'm going to talk in the next video about the idealization, devaluation, the discard, the hoovering, the good and the bad version of you, the splitting that happens with narcissists or gaslighters as they are looking upon you in a relationship. But in short, they have to have a victim. They have to have someone who is the bad one so they can put all of their negative feelings, all of their bad stuff into them. And by virtue of having that other person, they look better. So narcissistic supply isn't always getting praise and feeling prideful. Well, actually, they can still feel prideful if you're the bad one, right? So they're getting a supply from making you bad, wrong, crazy, overreacting, too dramatic, too much, a burden. They therefore have power. It's a power game. And they may very well be getting a source of supply from somewhere else. Could even be that they go away and they complain about you and they look like they're the victim. Now, I've got to jump in here and say that gaslighters, narcissistic characters love to say they are being gaslit. They know the dialogue, they know the word, they know the narrative, they learn it too. They're not stupid. They are human people with a brain and perception, and they can pick up the explanation of gaslighting and say you are the one who's gaslighting them. If you complain, if you say that their behaviour is way less than desirable, you're being the gaslighter. You're not. You're actually sort of calling them out on their behaviour. You're maybe saying it's bad and wrong, the effect on you, but you're not trying to control their reality. They're trying to get one over you before you can. And so they can jump in really quick and say you are the gaslighter. You are the one who's making them bad and wrong, and therefore they get to play the victim and play the violin. And they get to go to other people, particularly if they're a vulnerable narcissist, and give woe is me stories about how badly they are being treated by you. And tell stories of woe about how bad you are treating them. And that is all part of the gaslighting too, because it really destabilizes you. Because if you are an empathic, sensitive person, you're probably going to think that through. You're probably going to spend a lot of time and energy, more than you should, thinking, oh, where did I actually go wrong? Maybe I am bad and wrong. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I am too demanding. Maybe I did see that differently. And look, the gaslighting has been quite successful. So narcissistic-like behaviour needs supply to fill the narcissistic void. As I've described in a previous video, narcissists are empty inside, essentially. They are not able to sort of tune in on themselves for self-insight. And if you're a person who has a lot of self-insight and self-reflection, you'll know that that helps you often flesh yourself out. You can sort of go, okay, well, there's this part of me, and I do this here, and the effect of this behavior on others is that, and maybe I want to change that. For the narcissist, it's all about them, but the world does to them. So whether they're a grandiose narcissist who are, hello, I'm great, nothing wrong with me, everyone else has got a bit of a problem, but I'm fine, they still have this void that they have to keep filling with the grandiosity, with the with being acknowledged, with the accolades, with the achievements, with the things, with the image of themselves shining out, so that they don't have to get in contact with the emptiness and the void within them. The vulnerable narcissist, which, by the way, a grandiose narcissist can flip from being really grandiose into a very vulnerable victim-like state, but the overall vulnerable narcissist that doesn't have such a grandiose side, in fact, the grandiosity is in the vulnerability and in the victimness that they experience, their emptiness is more so. And they need to be feeling hard done by so that they can feel a sense of self, that they can identify themselves as in relationship to the other who's doing wrong to them. So the narcissistic void is why the narcissistic supply, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, is essential. The other thing that is relevant here is the narcissistic wound and the narcissistic rage. Now, as I'm describing all these things, I think it's relevant to point out that in human psychology, we are all things. We have access within our human framework to be absolutely terrible and absolutely good and everything in between. Nothing is out of the realms of our human behavior and consciousness. And in saying that, developmentally, many of us can have a narcissistic wound and outbursts of narcissistic rage. But it doesn't make us a narcissist as such. It just means that developmentally, something around our shame regulation didn't quite happen on par or on target. And that might be an over amount of sensitivity within us that's usually well masked by being functional or capable or life just going okay. But when we are really challenged or insulted or humiliated or made to be incredibly wrong, or when we lose face or we fall from grace, our narcissistic wound can be touched on. This is very early in development. We're looking at maybe around 2 years of age, maybe 1.5, maybe 3. And if you look at infants and toddlers, you can see them collapse on the floor in shame. The narcissistic wound is big because they're only little. They don't have their personality fully developed. They don't have their ego fully formed. And so some of us can have this within us, but we're not narcissistic as such. We've got plenty of empathy. We're not all about ourselves. We've got mind sight. We can see the effect of our behaviour on others, and we're, more or less balanced, except for these tiny little pieces. It's like wounding the inner child. Narcissistic rage is the reaction to the shame and the humiliation that is disproportional to the actual incident at hand. So not all narcissistic wounds, when poked on, will erupt into narcissistic rage, but many will. This can happen in a relatively normally developed personality, if we can say such a thing, but it certainly does happen in a narcissistic personality disorder or people with high amounts of narcissistic traits. It's the narcissistic rage, that inflamed, righteous indignation, that is the wrath that is brought upon you when you have, in some way, shape or form, humiliated or told the narcissist they are wrong. And hell hath no fury like a narcissist scorned. And this is why they can feel quite justified in making your life a living misery long after you've even split up, because leaving them will trigger the narcissistic wound and the narcissistic rage. And so the wounding makes you collapse inwards, right? There's a shame. The rage is a way to restore themselves. You made me feel bad, I'm going to make you feel 10 times worse. And I get to do that because you hurt me. You made me feel bad and wrong, so you are going to suffer. And that's pretty much how it operates. And so we can look at these factors as being the wellspring of the gaslighting, because a narcissistic person wants to control you. This enables them to secure their supply. You're the good one when you're in the good phase, when you're being idealized. You're the bad one when you're being devalued. But either way, you are the object of their emotional outbursts, and you are their thing. Right? You're not actually really a person to them. And I'm going to describe this better in the next video. You are essentially an object. You are essentially either making them look and feel better, or you are making them look and feel worse. There is a void within them, and within that void, there are very delicate parts that are known as a narcissistic wound and the explosive or indignant narcissistic rage. And so they will gaslight you more if you have triggered any of those points. But basically, if they can control you, they can control what you are going to be triggering within them. They can keep you well away from their narcissistic wound. They can keep you maybe stuck in this feeling of dependence within the relationship, because you're going to lose your sense of self and autonomy. And then they've always got this sort of thing there in relationship with them that is kind of controlled by their mood, by their vulnerability. And you will tread very carefully on eggshells around those dynamics. And so it works for them. They get to continue to behave badly, and you behave more in the way that they want you to because of that. And so they do it because they know no other way in a lot of ways. Some people do. Some people have an awareness of what they're doing, and they just really don't want to change. It works for them. And probably they don't have other options, but because of the way that narcissistic traits are set up, it's not their fault. It's your fault again, you have the problem. If you only behaved in a different ways, this wouldn't happen. And so that's kind of that abusive cycle. You made me do this, and therefore you're responsible for the pain you're experiencing. And without that ability to self-reflect and take accountability and responsibility wholeheartedly for the effect of their actions upon other people, narcissists don't change, and the dynamic seldom changes. It might just zigzag between all of these different variations, but it's never usually too predictable or safe or reliable. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about the dynamics within the narcissistic traits, personalities, or other psychological disorders or personality disorders like borderline or histrionic or antisocial personality or psychopathy, where there is this element of narcissism in terms of why this behavior happens. If you found this informative, please give me a like. If you'd like to hear more from me, please subscribe, and I wish you a good day.